The silver Aston Martin Valkyrie AMR Pro rolled into Rodri Motors with the quiet authority of $3 million on wheels. Harper Lancaster stepped out, her tailored suit sharp against the garage's grease-stained walls. 3 senior mechanics stood around the hybrid V12 engine, shaking their heads in defeat. Nobody dared touch the ECU system without factory support. Then a man in coveralls approached, tall and quiet, brown hair tasseled, hands still dirty from honest work. Mason Carter had been hired that morning. Harper raised an eyebrow as the garage owner explained this was their newest hire, a widower raising his daughter alone. Harper's laugh was cold as winter steel. "Fix this engine and I'll marry you," she said, half joking, half mocking. Everyone laughed. Mason just smiled quietly. Harper Lancaster had once believed in love the way children believe in fairy tales, with complete and trusting hearts. She had been 28 when she married Daniel Rothschild, heir to a shipping fortune, convinced that their merger of hearts would last longer than any corporate acquisition. For 3 years, she built her life around their shared dreams of expanding her family's logistics company while raising children in their Connecticut mansion. She worked 16-hour days to prove herself worthy of the Rothschild name, missing dinners and weekend retreats, always promising herself that success would buy them the time to truly connect. The betrayal came on a Tuesday evening in March. Harper had returned early from a business trip to surprise Daniel with his favorite wine and plans for a long overdue vacation. Instead, she found him in their bed with her assistant Sarah, the woman she had trusted with her schedules, her secrets, her entire professional life. The scene burned itself into her memory with photographic clarity. Daniel's shocked face, Sarah's desperate scramble for clothes, the rumpled sheets that Harper had picked out during their honeymoon in Italy. The divorce proceedings that followed were brutal in public. Daniel's lawyers painted Harper as a cold, career-obsessed woman who had neglected her marriage. The tabloids dubbed her the Ice Queen CEO, a nickname that followed her through boardrooms and charity galas. After the settlement, Harper threw herself into Lancaster Logistics with the single-minded focus of someone who had nothing left to lose. She acquired 3 smaller companies, expanded into international shipping, and built a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Her success was undeniable, but it came at a cost. She stopped dating entirely, built walls around her heart that seemed impenetrable, and earned a reputation for being brilliant but impossibly demanding. Employees whispered that she could freeze a room with a glance, that she had never been seen to laugh genuinely, that she treated romantic prospects like hostile takeover attempts. Meanwhile, Mason Carter's story unfolded in the shadows of aerospace hangars and hospital corridors. He had been the most promising aeronautical engineer in his division at Lockheed Martin, the kind of brilliant mind that could solve problems others hadn't even identified yet. His colleagues respected his ability to see patterns in complex systems, to understand how thousands of components work together to achieve something greater than their individual parts. Mason had married his college sweetheart Rebecca, a pediatric nurse with gentle hands and endless patience. They had planned their life with the careful precision of an engineering blueprint. Career advancement, a house in the suburbs, children who would grow up secure and loved. Rebecca died 3 months after Lily was born. Her body unable to recover from complications that the doctors said happened in less than 1% of cases, Mason held his newborn daughter in the hospital room where his wife had just passed away, feeling as though his entire world had collapsed into a singularity of grief and responsibility. The theoretical engineering problems that had once fascinated him seemed meaningless compared to the practical challenge of keeping a tiny human alive and healthy. He took extended leave, then resigned entirely, trading his promising career for whatever work would allow him to be present for his daughter. Harper Lancaster had once believed in love the way children believe in fairy tales, with complete and trusting hearts. Mason Carter had once believed in plans the way engineers believe in mathematics, with absolute faith in predictable outcomes. Both had learned that life had no respect for such beliefs. That evening, after the garage emptied and the laughter faded, Mason remained alone with the Valkyrie. He had heard the mockery in Harper Lancaster's voice, seeing the dismissive way she had looked at him, just another blue-collar worker unworthy of her attention. But Mason had also seen something else. A $3 million machine that nobody could fix, and a woman whose expensive car had become a symbol of her isolation. He approached the engine, not with wounded pride, but with genuine curiosity. The Aston Martin's hybrid system was a masterpiece of engineering complexity, combining a V12 internal combustion engine with advanced electric motors through a sophisticated energy recovery system. Most mechanics would have been intimidated by the sheer number of sensors, actuators, and control modules working in concert. Mason saw it differently. Every system, no matter how complex, was simply a collection of individual components that had to communicate with each other. The problem was usually in the communication, not the components themselves. He traced electrical pathways with the patience of someone who had once designed aircraft navigation systems, checking voltage readings and signal integrity with tools that seemed almost primitive compared to his former aerospace equipment. The dashboard displays showed normal readings for all major systems, but the engine management computer was throwing fault codes that made no sense in combination. Mason spent 2 hours methodically checking every connection, every ground point, every wire that carried data between the engine and its electronic brain. The problem, when he finally found it, was elegantly simple. A voltage converter buried deep in the hybrid system's architecture had been installed with an incorrect ground connection. The error was so small that it hadn't triggered any obvious warning lights, but it was enough to create electrical noise that confused the engine management system into shutting down the entire powertrain. It was the kind of mistake that could happen to anyone, but finding it required the patience to check every single connection rather than relying on diagnostic computers to identify the fault. Mason made the repair with careful precision, testing each step to ensure that his solution wouldn't create new problems elsewhere in the system. He cleared the fault codes, ran the engine through its startup sequence, and listened to the purr of perfectly balanced machinery. The Valkyrie was running better than it had since leaving the factory, but Mason didn't wake anyone to share his accomplishment. He simply cleaned his tools, washed his hands, and went home to check on his sleeping daughter. When Harper returned the next morning, expecting another day of frustration and mechanical excuses, the Aston Martin started immediately. The dashboard showed optimal performance readings across every system. She stared at the instruments in genuine surprise, then looked around the garage for an explanation. "Who fixed it?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of curiosity that hadn't been there the day before. The garage owner started to point toward Mason, but Mason caught his eye and shook his head slightly. He continued cleaning his hands with methodical attention, as if nothing unusual had happened. Harper found herself watching him with new interest, noticing the precision of his movements, the quiet confidence in the way he handled tools. For the first time in years, Harper Lancaster felt genuinely curious about another person's story. 2 weeks later, Harper found herself returning to Roderick Motors during her lunch break, ostensibly to check on some minor electrical issue that probably didn't exist. She discovered Mason sitting in a quiet corner of the garage with a 7-year-old girl curled up against his side, her head resting on his thigh as she napped. The child was small for her age, with delicate features and skin that seemed almost translucent in the afternoon light filtering through the garage windows. "My daughter, Lily," Mason explained quietly, careful not to wake her. "School ended early today, and my babysitter had an emergency." Lily stirred at the sound of voices, opening eyes that were startlingly blue against her pale complexion. She looked at Harper with the unguarded curiosity of childhood, taking in the expensive clothes and perfectly styled hair with wonder rather than judgment. "I dreamed about you," Lily said to Harper, her voice soft but clear. "You were a princess, but you were sad because your castle was empty." Harper felt something shift inside her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. She knelt down to bring herself to Lily's eye level, studying the child's face with growing concern. There was something fragile about Lily that went beyond her small stature, a quality that Harper recognized from painful memories of her younger brother Michael, who had died of congenital heart disease when Harper was 22. "She has a heart condition," Mason said quietly, answering Harper's unspoken question. Congenital cardiomyopathy? We manage it with medication and regular checkups, but it means she gets tired easily. Harper watched as Mason gently pressed his fingers against Lily's wrist, checking her pulse with the practiced ease of a parent who had learned to monitor vital signs as naturally as checking the time. The gesture was so tender, so filled with protective love, that Harper felt tears threatening for the first time in years. She had built her life around the philosophy that emotional vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford. But watching this quiet man care for his fragile daughter awakened something she thought had died with her own dreams of family. The doctors say she might need surgery eventually. Mason continued, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying deep worry. A heart transplant if the medication stops working. But for now, we're managing day by day. Lily looked between the two adults, sensing the weight of their conversation, even if she didn't understand all the medical terminology. Daddy takes really good care of me, she told Harper with absolute confidence. He knows how to fix everything that's broken. Harper spent the rest of her lunch break talking with Lily about school, about her favorite books, about the pictures she drew of imaginary worlds where everyone was healthy and happy. When it was time to leave, Harper found herself reluctant to return to the sterile efficiency of her office, to the endless meetings and strategic planning sessions that had once seemed so important. Over the following weeks, Harper developed a pattern of visiting the garage during lunch hours, always with some plausible excuse about checking on her car or asking technical questions about automotive engineering. She brought coffee for Mason and cookies for Lily, claiming she had bought too much food and didn't want it to go to waste. These small deceptions felt necessary, protecting her from having to examine too closely why she was drawn to this quiet corner of her carefully controlled world. Their conversations ranged from technical discussions about hybrid engines to more personal topics about resilience and adaptation. Mason never complained about his circumstances, never expressed bitterness about the career he had abandoned or the challenges of single parenthood. Instead, he talked about finding meaning in small victories, Lily's good days at school, a particularly challenging repair job completed successfully, the satisfaction of work that required both intellectual problem-solving and physical skill. "Don't you miss being an aeronautical engineer?" Harper asked one afternoon as they shared sandwiches while Lily played with toy cars in the corner. Mason considered the question carefully as he seemed to consider everything. "I miss the intellectual challenges sometimes," he admitted, "but I've learned that there are different kinds of problems worth solving. Keeping Lily healthy and happy feels more important than designing aircraft navigation systems that I might never see in action." Harper found herself sharing more about her own life than she had with anyone in years. She talked about the pressure of running a family business, about the loneliness that success had brought her, about the way her failed marriage had taught her to trust numbers and contracts more than emotions and promises. Mason listened without judgment, occasionally asking thoughtful questions that helped Harper understand her own motivations more clearly. "You talk about your business like it's a fortress," he observed one day, "something that protects you from the world." "Maybe it is," Harper replied. "Maybe that's exactly what I need." "Or maybe," Mason said gently, "it's become a prison instead of a fortress, and you're the only one who can unlock the door." The conversation that changed everything happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon in late October. Harper had arrived at the garage to find Mason examining a spark plug under a magnifying glass, turning it slowly in the light to study its condition. She watched him work for several minutes before speaking. "You approach every problem like it's a puzzle worth solving," she said. "Even the smallest components get your full attention." Mason looked up from the spark plug, meeting her eyes directly. "I learned a long time ago that small things can cause big failures," he said. "In aerospace engineering, a tiny manufacturing defect can bring down an entire aircraft. In relationships, a small misunderstanding left unrest can destroy years of trust. With Lily's heart condition, a missed medication or ignored symptom could be life-threatening. So, yes, I pay attention to details." Harper felt the truth of his words settle into her bones. She had spent years focusing on big strategies and major acquisitions, while ignoring the small signals that might have saved her marriage or helped her build genuine connections with other people. Her success had been built on the assumption that bigger was always better, that more control meant more security, that emotional distance was a sign of professional strength. "What if you're wrong?" she asked quietly. "What if paying attention to small things just means you're constantly worried about everything falling apart?" Mason smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Then at least when things do fall apart, you know you did everything you could to prevent it. And sometimes when you're really paying attention, you can fix problems before they become disasters." The media storm began with a single photograph taken by Marcus Chen, an automotive blogger who made his living capturing candid moments of wealthy car enthusiasts. He had been documenting the culture around high-end auto repair shops when he spotted Harper Lancaster, one of the most recognizable CEOs in the logistics industry, sitting on a workbench at Roderick Motors, sharing what appeared to be an intimate lunch with a man in coveralls. The image itself was innocuous enough. Harper laughing at something Mason had said while Lily played with toy cars nearby. All three of them bathed in the golden afternoon light, filtering through the garage windows, but the caption Chen chose transformed the innocent scene into social media gold. Ice Queen CEO melts for blue-collar Romeo. Harper Lancaster's secret garage romance. Within 24 hours, the photograph had been shared thousands of times across various platforms. Business journalists began speculating about Harper's personal life with a hungry enthusiasm of entertainment reporters. The contrast between her reputation as a ruthless corporate leader and the apparent tenderness captured in the image created a narrative that seemed tailor-made for viral content. The story gained momentum when a former employee at Lancaster Logistics anonymously provided details about Harper's divorce and her subsequent romantic isolation. Suddenly, every business publication wanted to explore the human side of the woman who had been portrayed as emotionally invulnerable for years. Photographers began camping outside Roderick Motors, hoping to capture more images of the unlikely couple. Harper's board of directors called an emergency meeting. The men and women who had supported her aggressive business strategies suddenly seemed uncomfortable with her personal choices becoming public knowledge. Board chairman Robert Ashworth, a 70-year-old traditionalist who had been skeptical of Harper's leadership from the beginning, led the charge for damage control. "This kind of publicity undermines our corporate image," Ashworth declared during the emergency session. "Our clients and investors expect a certain level of professionalism from our leadership team. Dating a mechanic suggests poor judgment and questionable priorities." Harper felt the familiar chill of betrayal. The same sensation she had experienced during her divorce proceedings. The people who benefited from her success were now questioning her personal life as if it were a business decision requiring board approval. She realized that her carefully constructed professional identity had become another kind of prison, one where even the possibility of personal happiness was seen as a threat to shareholder value. The pressure intensified when Lancaster Logistics' stock price dipped slightly in response to the media attention. Financial analysts suggested that investors were concerned about Harper's distraction from business priorities. Several major clients requested reassurance that her personal life wouldn't affect her professional performance. The whispers in boardrooms and at industry conferences painted her as a woman who had lost focus, who had allowed emotion to compromise her legendary business acumen. Harper found herself facing an impossible choice: defend her right to personal happiness or protect the company she had spent years building. The decision felt like choosing between two different versions of herself. The successful CEO who had sacrificed everything for professional achievement, and the woman who had recently rediscovered the possibility of genuine human connection. The press conference was scheduled for a Friday morning at Lancaster Logistics corporate headquarters. Harper stood behind the podium in her most authoritative business suit, looking directly into the cameras with the cold confidence that had made her famous. The assembled journalists expected either a romantic confession or a dramatic denial, something that would provide content for another news cycle. Instead, Harper delivered a masterclass in professional damage control. The recent media attention regarding my personal life has been based on speculation and misinterpretation, she said, her voice carrying no trace of emotion. I have no romantic relationship with any employee of Roderick Motors. The photographs in question captured a business discussion about automotive maintenance, nothing more. I would appreciate if the media would focus on Lancaster Logistics' record-breaking quarterly performance rather than creating fictional narratives about my private life. Mason watched the press conference from the garage's small office, Lily asleep in his arms after another difficult day at school. He saw the familiar mask slip over Harper's features, watched her transform back into the untouchable CEO who had first mocked him weeks earlier. He felt no anger at her denial, only a deep sadness for the woman who had briefly allowed herself to be vulnerable and was now retreating behind corporate armor to protect what she thought mattered most. The next morning, Mason submitted his resignation to Roderick Motors without fanfare or explanation. He left no forwarding address, no message for Harper, no dramatic gesture that might create more media attention. He simply collected his tools, kissed Lily goodbye as she headed to school, and disappeared from Harper's carefully ordered world as quietly as he had entered it. Harper returned to the garage 3 days later, expecting to find Mason at his usual workstation. Instead, she found only an empty corner where his toolbox used to sit, and the lingering scent of engine oil and honest work. The garage owner explained Mason's departure with obvious regret, mentioning that he had been their best mechanic despite working there for such a short time. For the first time since her divorce, Harper Lancaster felt truly alone. Her stock price had recovered. The media attention had moved on to other stories, and her board of directors had praised her handling of the crisis. She had successfully protected her professional reputation and maintained her image as an uncompromising business leader. But success felt hollow when measured against the absence of Mason's quiet presence and Lily's innocent laughter. Harper threw herself back into work with desperate intensity, staying late every night to review quarterly reports and strategic plans that suddenly seemed meaningless. She attended board meetings and industry conferences where colleagues congratulated her on weathering the media storm, their approval feeling like consolation prizes for a game she wasn't sure she wanted to win. 3 weeks after Mason's departure, Harper received a phone call that changed everything. The voice belonged to Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the pediatric cardiologist at Children's Hospital, calling to inform Harper that Lily Carter had been admitted for emergency surgery. Mason had apparently listed Harper as an emergency contact, a detail that surprised both the doctor and Harper herself. Her condition has deteriorated rapidly, Dr. Mitchell explained. She needs immediate valve replacement surgery, but there are complications with insurance approval and payment arrangements. The father seems to be handling everything alone, and frankly, he appears to be under tremendous stress. Harper drove to the hospital without thinking about the implications for her carefully protected public image. She found Mason in the cardiac intensive care unit's waiting room, slumped in a plastic chair with his head in his hands, looking more exhausted than she had ever seen him. Technical drawings were scattered on the floor around his feet, sketches of what appeared to be a mechanical heart valve design that he had been working on during the long hours of waiting. When Mason looked up and saw her, his expression showed no surprise, only gratitude mixed with the bone-deep weariness of a parent facing every father's worst nightmare. Harper sat down beside him without speaking, her presence offering the only comfort she knew how to give. They waited together in the sterile hospital corridor. Two people who had built walls around their hearts, now united by concern for a 7-year-old girl who had shown them both what love without conditions looked like. "I should have stayed in aerospace engineering," Mason said quietly. More to himself than to Harper. The insurance would have been better, the salary higher. Maybe I could have afforded better preventive care. Maybe we would have caught this sooner. Harper took his hand, feeling the calluses from years of honest work, the slight tremor of exhaustion and fear. "You gave her something more valuable than money," she said. "You gave her a father who was present for every day, who knew her well enough to notice when something was wrong, who loved her enough to sacrifice his own ambitions for her well-being." The surgery lasted 6 hours. During that time, Harper quietly arranged for the hospital's best pediatric cardiac surgeon to join the team, ensured that all experimental treatments would be covered regardless of insurance limitations, and established a trust fund that would guarantee Lily's future medical care. She did all of this without consulting Mason, without seeking recognition or gratitude, simply because it was the right thing to do for a child who had taught her that dreams were worth believing in. When Dr. Mitchell emerged from the operating room with news of the surgery's success, Mason wept with relief while Harper held his shoulders, feeling her own tears fall for the first time in years. Lily would recover fully, the surgeon explained, though she would need ongoing care and regular checkups for the rest of her life. That night, as Lily slept peacefully in her hospital bed, surrounded by monitors that showed a steady, strong heartbeat, Harper and Mason talked about second chances and the courage required to rebuild a life from broken pieces. Neither of them mentioned the media storm that had driven them apart, focusing instead on the future they might create together if they were brave enough to try. "I'm not the same person who made that joke in your garage," Harper said, as dawn light began filtering through the hospital windows. "That woman was afraid of everything that mattered. I don't want to be afraid anymore." Mason looked at her with eyes that held no judgment, only understanding. "We're all afraid of something," he said. "The question is whether we let fear make our decisions for us, or whether we choose to act despite being afraid." Harper realized that she had spent years building her identity around professional achievements that felt empty compared to the simple act of holding vigil beside a child's hospital bed. Success without connection was just elaborate loneliness, and all the money in the world couldn't buy the sense of purpose she had found in caring about Mason and Lily's well-being. 6 months after Lily's surgery, Harper Lancaster made an announcement that shocked the business world. She was stepping down as CEO of Lancaster Logistics to pursue new opportunities in vocational education and small business development. The decision cost her millions in stock options and executive compensation, but it gave her something she had never possessed: the freedom to build a life based on her own values rather than other people's expectations. Harper and Mason opened Phoenix Garage together, a combination auto repair shop and technical training center located in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town. Their mission was simple but revolutionary: provide high-quality automotive education to people who had been written off by traditional career paths, creating opportunities for ex-convicts, high school dropouts, and anyone else who needed a second chance. Mason designed the curriculum while Harper handled business operations and community outreach. They hired instructors who combined technical expertise with genuine care for their students, creating an environment where learning happened through mentorship rather than judgment. The garage quickly developed a reputation for excellent work and fair prices, while the training program began graduating skilled technicians who went on to successful careers throughout the region. Harper discovered that she was better at teaching business principles to eager students than she had ever been at impressing board members with quarterly projections. She found genuine satisfaction in watching former addicts rebuild their lives through honest work, in seeing teenage mothers gain financial independence through skilled trades, in creating pathways to stability for people who had been told they were failures. The transformation wasn't easy. Harper had to learn how to work with her hands, how to diagnose engine problems through sound and feel rather than computer analysis, how to communicate with students who came from vastly different backgrounds than her own privileged upbringing. But every challenge taught her something new about resilience, about the dignity found in all honest work, about the strength that comes from helping others succeed. Mason watched Harper's evolution with quiet amazement. The woman who had once mocked his blue-collar work now spent her days teaching young people to take pride in technical skills, to see mechanical aptitude as a form of intelligence worth developing. She had traded her designer suits for practical workflow, her corner office for a classroom that smelled of motor oil and possibility. Lily thrived in the environment they created together. Her heart condition still required careful monitoring, but she had grown stronger and more confident as she watched the two most important adults in her life build something meaningful from broken pieces. She became the unofficial mascot of Phoenix Garage, charming students and customers with her intelligence and warmth, reminding everyone that love could heal more than just broken engines. 1 year after opening Phoenix Garage, Harper decided it was time to acknowledge publicly what had been obvious to everyone who knew them. She and Mason had built more than just a successful business together. The occasion was their first anniversary celebration, a community gathering that brought together their students, customers, and friends for an evening of recognition and gratitude. Harper took the microphone during the dinner program, holding a small wrapped package that she had been carrying for weeks while gathering the courage to make her intentions clear. The room fell silent as she unwrapped an old spark plug from her Aston Martin Valkyrie, now polished to a silver shine and mounted on a small wooden base. A year ago, Harper began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I made a joke to a man I barely knew. I said if he could fix my engine, I would marry him. I thought I was being clever, maybe a little cruel, definitely superior to someone I saw as beneath my notice." She turned to face Mason, who was sitting at the head table with Lily beside him, both of them watching her with expressions of love and anticipation. "What I didn't understand then was that he didn't just fix my car," Harper continued. "He fixed something in me that I didn't even realize was broken. He showed me that real strength isn't about controlling other people or building walls around your heart. Real strength is about showing up for the people you love day after day, whether it's glamorous or not." Harper approached Mason's table, holding out the mounted spark plug like an offering. "So, I'm not joking this time when I say you fixed my engine, Mason Carter. You fixed my heart. You fixed my understanding of what matters in life. And you fixed my faith in the possibility that two broken people can build something beautiful together." Mason stood to accept the gift, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box containing a ring that Lily had designed. A simple silver band inlaid with tiny gears and springs. A piece of jewelry that looked like it had been crafted by someone who understood that the most beautiful things are also the most functional. "I love you, Harper Lancaster," Mason said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "I love your intelligence, your ambition, your capacity for growth, and your willingness to get your hands dirty for the people you care about. I love the way you've learned to see beauty in ordinary work, and the way you've taught me that it's possible to dream again without forgetting the lessons that loss has taught us." The proposal that followed was witnessed by 200 people who had found hope and opportunity at Phoenix Garage, a community that understood the value of second chances and the courage required to rebuild a life from broken pieces. When Harper said yes, the celebration that erupted was genuine and joyful, a recognition that love stories don't always follow predictable patterns, and that the best endings often begin with someone brave enough to fix what seems irreparable. 2 years later, the Lancaster Carter family lived in a comfortable house within walking distance of Phoenix Garage. Their daily routines shaped by the rhythms of work, school, and the quiet satisfaction of building something lasting together. The Aston Martin Valkyrie sat in their driveway, now decorated with a small decal that read, "Fixed with Love," a reminder of the joke that had become a promise, and the promise that had become a life. Harper had learned to find joy in small victories. A struggling student mastering a difficult repair, a customer whose car troubles were solved with patience and skill, a daughter who grew stronger and more confident with each passing day. Mason had discovered that there were many ways to be an engineer, that solving human problems could be just as intellectually satisfying as designing aircraft navigation systems. Lily, now 9 years old and healthy, served as the bridge between her parents' different worlds. Equally comfortable discussing business strategy with Harper and engine diagnostics with Mason, she had inherited her father's mechanical aptitude and her stepmother's strategic thinking. But more importantly, she had learned from both of them that love was something you chose to practice every day, not just something that happened to you. On quiet Sunday mornings, when Phoenix Garage was closed and the family had time to themselves, Harper would sometimes sit in the Valkyrie and remember the woman she used to be. Successful, but isolated, protected, but lonely, powerful, but ultimately powerless to create the connections that gave life meaning. The transformation had cost her millions of dollars and forced her to abandon an identity she had spent years building. But it had given her something infinitely more valuable. A family built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the daily choice to fix what was broken rather than discard what seemed damaged beyond repair. The spark plug that had started everything sat on their mantelpiece, polished and proud. A symbol of the truth that the smallest components can sometimes power the most important transformations. Harper Lancaster had learned that engines aren't the only things that can be fixed with patience, skill, and love. Sometimes broken hearts just need the right mechanic, someone willing to trace every connection until they find the source of the problem, someone patient enough to make repairs that will last a lifetime.